the recent Grad Zero survey from 2021, international students highlighted several topics that they see as problems during their time here at the U. Nearly half of international students mentioned they were concerned about having adequate financial support. Nearly 2/3 were concerned about maintaining good mental health. Half of students were concerned about managing their immigration or visa status, and nearly 1/4 were concerned about harassment that includes xenophobia and other discrimination. Is that shocking to you?
No, those data aren't shocking to me. And I think that if we look at Grad Zero data post George Floyd, as well as in connection to the pandemic, there's a lot of similar findings with not just international students, but US born students of color. And I think mental health in particular has been really rough for U of M students. So I'm not surprised that international students feel the way that this Grad Zero data is reported.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we can both agree that these issues have deep effects on students' personal lives, but how do you think these issues might affect their output as students, their career, and graduate and postgraduate success?
I think that with so much online teaching, probably since many of them started, I think that creates a sense of isolation. Mm-hmm. And if you aren't really developing a community among classmates and a good relationship with your advisor, I think it could be very difficult to be successful because you're not able to kind of get socialized into academia in the US, which is a completely different thing than the way it is in other countries or contexts. So I feel like that's probably the biggest issue, related to, how this connects to your academic success. Because if you don't, feel comfortable, if you don't feel healthy and supported financially in other ways, if you're worried about your visa, how can you settle into, your studies in a productive way?
Absolutely. And you mentioned, I think, something very important, that is that relationship between students, and specifically here international graduate students, and their faculty advisor, right? I think often we see a lot of student groups that target specific groups of students, including international students, but we don't talk a lot about that relationship between student and advisor through that lens of international students. How do you think that student advisor relationship may be different when we're thinking about international graduate students?
I think that there has to be a lot of expectation setting for how much contact the advisor and the student are expecting from each other. I think that if they're expecting to meet with their advisor every week and get feedback on everything they do, I think that the advisor probably needs to help manage those expectations. A lot of professors wait until they hear from the student. So if the student isn't forthcoming about their need for a meeting, they might not get one for a long time. So I think that, helping the students kind of have an expectation meeting with the professor would be a good thing. But I think professors also need to know that some of their students are going to be quiet unless they're invited in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we need to remember that when we're thinking about international students, we tend to refer to them as, or to us, since I am an international student, as a monolithic group, but actually we're coming from all over the world with diverse educational backgrounds, diverse cultures. So from what I understand, what you're saying is that advisors and more broadly faculty and staff working with international students need to make sure they're bridging those cultural gaps, correct?
That's true. Absolutely.
And in what other ways do you think that faculty and staff could better support international graduate students?
I think welcoming them in all of the orientation meetings is important, but it has to be much more than that. There have to be spaces where students can get informal information. You know, they don't necessarily know how the systems work here. And so I think that in meetings with peers and with faculty and social, informal social meetings, I think those are really helpful to make the student feel welcome.
Do you have any personal experience with international graduate students that you have worked with in that capacity?
I've been working with international students my whole professional life since I started as a teacher in my 20s, actually. And so I've had many undergraduate and graduate students. Everybody is different. Everybody has different levels of autonomy in doing their work and what their needs are. So I guess I have as many stories as I have students, but I do have, I guess, a few tips that I've kind of learned along the way that I would like to share with somebody who might be newer to working with international students. And I have to say that maybe sometimes this would cross it over to first gen students, as well as like immigrant and refugee background students. Um, so, so number one, a lot of the assignments that we ask students to do are what I call hidden genres. So like you might say, do a literature review or do a research proposal. And without examples, students might not know what these things are supposed to look like. It's a hidden genre. So you have to like pull back the curtain so that they can see what you're expecting. Otherwise, it can feel kind of mysterious what they're supposed to be doing. So I've learned that having examples of course assignments, as well as like those big milestone written pieces like preliminary exams, thesis proposals. Of course, dissertations are easily accessible online, but even if you can point students toward dissertations or theses that you think are really good examples for kind of the sort of research they're doing, I believe that that's really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very important. And I actually never heard the term hidden genres, but I think that captures it perfectly, right? I think a lot of things that faculty and staff that are from the United States or have been living and working in the United States for a long time, a lot of things that they take for granted, right? And that specific populations of students, like you mentioned, first gen students, international students, might not have that language. So having that direct communication, I think, is very important. Are there other tools that you think faculty and staff should have in their toolbox?
Yeah, I think that sometimes faculty are worried about some of their international students' English proficiency, especially in writing. And of course, not all international students are English learners, but many are. And I would just say to them, give them time. They need time. And you just have to try your best to understand what they're trying to argue in their writing or what they're trying to do, and then give them support to express what they want to say little by little in more and more academic terms. So I strongly suggest that professors don't just say, go to the writing center and fix it.
Mhm.
Because, I think that the advisor is the one that understands those hidden genres and understands the discipline that they're trying to become a member of. So the advisor really does need to in many ways be a language support person. That doesn't mean that the professor has to edit everything, but the professor needs to like even sometimes go in and give example phrases of like how you make a text coherent and cohesive, and how, you know, you know, even just what formula you can follow in an academic paper, and, you know, the kind of journal that the students are trying to publish in. So while the Writing Center is an amazing support and should be used also for thesis proposals and prelim exams, I don't prescribe to the philosophy that students need to do all of it completely independently. They can do even those more high stakes writing tasks with professional support. I encourage them to also have writing groups with each other, but it's remarkable if you look at your international students, you know, at the time they begin their program till the time they end, they make an enormous progress. So I would say be patient and supportive, and um, don't make them feel anxious about their language. Just always, you know, be encouraging. Otherwise, they can feel silenced and, you know, way too shy about speaking in class, or, you know, they might not be able to find their voice in their writing if they feel like the reader is too oppressive. I mean, we have enough self-editing that we do on our own. We don't need to have voices of our advisor or our professors making us feel inadequate too.
I'd like to go back to, you mentioned referring students to the Writing Center, right? And extending that to other offices and departments at the university, like ISSS, the library system, etc. How important do you think it is for advisors to know the proper place to refer students? Anecdotally, we see a lot of international students, no matter what their issue is, being referred to the international students and scholar services for issues that might not be under their purview, right? How do you think advisors could be better prepared to direct students to the proper locations to get support with their issues and needs?
I think that the students are more familiar with what the ISSS office does than professors. Because they use ISSS for all things related to their visa and, you know, everything official. I think it would be good for professors to have a place where they can go to get resources other than that, and to be a little bit more informed. As well as, you know, everything else that all students get related to mental health services. And other opportunities to find classmates that maybe they have like a co-ethnic affinity with, or a language affinity, or a religious affinity. So yeah, like for instance, I know that there's a Somali Student Association at the U of M, but some of those students are feel more affinity with the Muslim Student Association or with an African American Student Association. So I guess that would be another thing that I would advise, is that professors shouldn't essentialize the identities that they think their students have. They might not really know who their people are, or where they would find, you know, their affinity groups.
Absolutely, and that harks back to the multilingualism that you mentioned, right? That international students, again, are not a monolithic group. They have diverse identities. They're coming from various places. Their experiences are different, so their needs are different too. And I think you used a keyword that you used. I think you used a keyword there, being informed, right? I think often, or I wonder if advisors are often. Wait, let me reformulate this. I think advisors often may be overwhelmed by the quantity of information they think they might need to know in order to help international students, right? So for instance, all the visa types, all the immigration laws, all of this. What would you say about that? How much do you think advisors need to know versus how much do you think they need to be informed or ready to refer students to the proper locations?
I'm just going to close my window. Hold on a second. With respect to what professors are supposed to know about visas, I think that the students who are worried about their immigration status, like DACA students, I really think professors need to know about that, because those students might feel at risk in ways that they can't, professors can't predict, and that professors need to be able to protect them.
Mhm.
So for DACA students, I think it's really important. For international students, what we've seen, over the years is like what they called the Muslim ban under the last, administration. Students from certain countries, weren't able to get visas. So, that was important, but that was headline news
Mhm.
as well. Intricacies about like how students can do an internship after their degree is over, or how they can get paid in different ways. I think that those things are also important. There's rules too at the University of Minnesota that international students can't have appointments that go beyond 50%. And so sometimes I've seen professors, want to go over that 50%, but they're just not allowed to. So I think that there are some things that they need to understand about their visa status, but I don't think that we should be expected to keep up on everything related to immigration law.
Yeah, absolutely. As a student, I can definitely tell you that no one expects that, and we don't know everything about our status either. But really expect faculty and staff to be aware of how those issues exist, right, and where they can direct us. Um, what would you tell? What would you suggest a faculty do to become better informed about this and other topics pertaining to international students?
I think that they could have quick presentations by, international students at faculty meetings or faculty retreats. Sometimes it's nice to have a captive audience rather than expecting them to go to a website. Some will, some that are, especially those that haven't had very much experience with international students, will be hungry for a written resource, but sometimes to reach more faculty, I think it would be good to either use that resource at a faculty meeting or have an international student come and present, maybe in conjunction with the resource. Have the graduate program coordinators do mini workshops
Mhm.
on different topics. That's what I
So
would say.
would you encourage individual faculty and departments as a whole to seek those resources and to put in that work to become better prepared to assist international students?
Well, I think that department chairs like me, would be good at encouraging, but it's very difficult to force faculty to do things, So I think that possibly some kind of a face-to-face experience would probably be would reach perhaps some of the professors that maybe are at the root of some of these grad CERU data.
Mhm. One of our beliefs at SIGS is that the cultural change that needs to occur in order for international students to feel more at home at campus and to maximize their potential, both while in graduate school and after, is that these cultural changes will require action from faculty and staff, right? Especially if you think about students only being here for 2, 3, 4 years. We need faculty and staff to seek those changes and seek to become better informed. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. The U of M benefits so much from international students. and they deserve to have their needs met, and they deserve to be fully included, fully advised, and fully supported in every way at the U of M. They really do. So I think it's an ethical obligation to do so. They certainly are paying enough. So
Absolutely. And
that's my feeling.
what do you think are some of the obstacles for you or your colleagues to more efficiently and effectively support international graduate students?
Gosh.
Sorry for the hardball.
You know what? I think that it's all about relationships. Is that if you have a pedagogy that's very much teacher-centered, it doesn't give you the opportunity to get to know your students. It's like not everybody has a lab where they can have a lot of one-on-one interaction. So if you're in a classroom where, you know, it's a lot of lecture, I don't know how you're going to get to know your students. And I'm not sure if faculty have the strategies necessarily to get the feedback that they need from international students. Because it might be that international students feel nervous about giving the professor any kind of critique. They just want to make it through, and they don't want to necessarily challenge the authority, especially if it's kind of an authoritarian class where the teacher talks all the time. So I think one of our obstacles is probably something related to like how we conceive our instructional roles to be and our advising roles to be. You know, if you're an advisor that's very dogmatic and authoritarian, you're not going to get the kind of conversation that you need to get with an international student to know what they need. And ideologically, you might end up seeing them as just having a lot of deficits and no assets. So I think we have ideological barriers to break down as well.
That was a great answer.
Good. I had another thing that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
Related to how international students are sometimes perceived. So in fields, in many fields, probably, you know, epidemiology and every field, right? The topics of race have become really important. And I would be surprised if there's any major at the U of M that doesn't in some way deal with race and the intersections related to race, you know, gender and culture and ethnicity and language and many things. But I think that you have to, as a student at the U of M, you have to get smart on issues related to race really quickly. And if you're an international student, you might seem naive if you haven't had the opportunity to think about race in a US context. And so I think that that's another area for growth of professors, is that they need to understand that all international students, they haven't been through US schooling. And so they might not have all the words that their US born classmates have to talk about marginalization or racialization or othering. They just don't talk that way about difference. So I would encourage people to try to get beyond everybody using so-called woke language to move into like talking about real issues and making classrooms safe spaces to possibly use the wrong word to continue to talk about the important conversations that we have to talk about related to race.
I don't want to say the word. So I wanted to ask, do you think that faculty and staff have a duty? I don't know if I like the word duty there. So if you can think of a different word, but have a duty to assist international graduate students with bridging those cultural differences with the topic of race, for instance, or understanding other systems and structures within the United States, right? Healthcare, employment, um, all those things. Do you think that's a good question to follow up? Or
Yeah, I do. I think that there have been many initiatives at the University of Minnesota to internationalize our curriculum. And I think that we should deepen the ways that we do that beyond, assigning an article or a chapter that is a study from a context outside the US. I think that, like the knowledge that's been created outside of the US is important to include in our curriculum. But I also think that it's important to, students came to the US to study for a reason, right? So I think that that we need to also help them, scaffold them in to understanding the complex social, cultural, racial, economic, historical realities here in the US. So I think that that's really important to be able to kind of step outside our US centric worlds to be to find ways of welcoming in and helping the students figure out what the issues are locally here and maybe compare to the way it is in other countries that they've lived in.
absolutely.
Also, I think that it would be even another layer is to encourage students to read things in other languages that they speak. Many of our international students are not just bilingual, but multilingual. And so I think that it would be a really good step for professors to encourage them to do reading in their languages. Sometimes there could be opportunities where they can present in their languages as well. Contexts here in the US as well as abroad, so that, if they end up not staying in the US, they are able to talk about their work in their own languages. I think that that's sometimes a sad thing that happens is that they get so used to talking about their work in English that they don't feel fluent in their other languages to talk about the same thing.
Aside, that's definitely a problem that I have as well. I cannot communicate my area of expertise in my native language.
What's your native language?
I'm from Brazil, so Portuguese.
That's what I would have guessed.
Oh, wow, that's a first. Usually people guess Russian or Greek for some reason.
No.
Do you have any more questions from your list of points you'd like to?
Yeah, I would say that advisors have to also remember that international grad students only have their stipend from their assistantship from funding usually. I mean, some can take out a loan or some might have money from their parents or their savings, but most students are trying to make do, often with a roommate, living close to campus, that, they don't have unlimited resources. And what I've noticed with international students is sometimes it takes them months to venture away from the U of M campus, even just to, enjoy the lakes, or other places within the cities, much less places that you can drive to. So I'd like advisors to know that there are serious mobility constraints and financial constraints. So for instance, I wanted to take a student, an international student with me on a research project abroad. And I needed to build in, the cost for her visa, the cost for her COVID test, the cost for her transportation to and from the airport, like, you can't assume that the student can just absorb all of these additional costs. So I think that, that is important awareness.
Absolutely. I think there's a long-standing stereotype that international students in the United States come from wealthy backgrounds. But anecdotally, from personal experience, a lot of us are truly making ends meet just with our graduate stipends, right? And we're not allowed to work outside of campus in a survival gig or serving or retail or whatever it may be. We have
Exactly.
limitations in the numbers of hours. So do you think then advisors and staff have a responsibility to assist international students with this financial literacy, with developing a life in the United States, right, within the systems and structures that exist?
Yes, absolutely. I think that it is something that advisors can take the initiative on, but sometimes it's not a heavy lift. I've been meeting every week at a cafe with some visiting scholars from abroad, and some international students come to that frequently as well. And just the consistency of like having a check-in and meeting, then what I see is that they start inviting each other to do things, and that's it. It just happens really organically and nicely. And I think a lot of times they want to do things with each other, not with me. So so I think that you can set up like a structure and then let it blossom in a natural way, as long as everybody feels comfortable.
Absolutely. I think um, when it comes to international students, I think a lot of advisors may be reticent to broach topics like that, right? Topics related to multiculturalism, topics related to their personal lives or financial well-being, whatever it may be. What would you have to say to those advisors in encouraging them to do so?
I think that, well, right, not all of us are comfortable talking about hot topics. We can admit that, right? So I think giving yourself a pass on missteps is a good thing. If professors feel uncomfortable, they need to do their own work, though, related to understanding social issues in the U.S. And I think that they should, they can even help international students with relevant readings or blogs on the topic, especially when it is linked to the discipline.
Mhm.
But also the best thing that they can do is create a culture in their classroom where classmates don't snap at each other for not being perfect in the way they're talking, or their gaps in knowledge. So it pains me when international students say that they got criticized in a class, but it wasn't by the professor, it was by a classmate, and they've just felt bad because they didn't mean to offend, and they just didn't know even what was the offense. A simple strategy that I've used in my classes is it's really easy. If somebody feels offended by something someone says, they can just say ouch. And
Mhm.
then the person who said something, that made them say ouch, can just say oops. And
Mhm.
then they can follow up together later. So ouch and oops.
I
That's
like
all, that's all it is.
that's very simple. How did you come about this strategy?
A teacher told me to do it. Yeah.
So what you're telling me is that interaction with other faculty and staff derived in a very effective
Yeah.
strategy, which brings me to this resource, right? So this website was developed by six in working together with the graduate school and ISSS to develop a space like this, right, where different resources, different ideas can live in a single page. Do you think that could be helpful to create more resources and to create more strategies to better serve international?
Absolutely. Very useful. I wanted to also suggest that you find a way to get it into the hands of graduate instructors international graduate instructors themselves, and other graduate instructors that are new to instruction, teaching in higher ed. So we're onboarding constantly new instructors into our undergraduate programs. So they all need to get up to speed as well. Many of them are international themselves, but they still need to understand how to work with students from lots of different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
I'd also like to say that as with all of our graduate students, the relationships that you have with your international students go on long after they leave. So I feel honored to have been invited to people's countries.
Wow.
To work on projects. I love it when my students come back to visit and they look me up. I love it when, they write me into a grant that they're working on. So these relationships can be very synergistic for decades. We hope that we don't have to write recommendation letters for years and years and years, but we do. We do that too. We might even need to write letters of promotion for our former students. So there's that kind of, benefit and support that is ongoing. The other thing that I wanted to say is that it's really helpful to publish with your international students, because then they can see up close the whole process of conceptualizing a research question and carrying out the research and analyzing the data and then writing it and publishing it and presenting it. So those opportunities are the things that students are most hungry for. I would say that they would forego any potluck for the chance to publish with their advisor.
Absolutely. International students often rely on their productivity during their graduate career for immigration purposes, right? Whether they want to stay in the US or perhaps go to a third country, often how much they produce and the quality of what they produce during their graduate program and graduate training has a direct effect on that. How do you think faculty and staff can assist international students in that process?
I think that it should start from the beginning. I think that faculty should admit students that they really want to work with, that have interests that closely align with their own, because then it's easy. Then they can just, slide into the research program really nicely.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the best. That's the best way to make that happen. Otherwise, sometimes you need to let go of an advisor and let them work with somebody else, or get your head into their research interests as well. That's all that
Absolutely.
I can suggest. Yeah.
Is there any other questions you'd like to talk about? I feel like I could talk to you about this for hours and hours.
I know.
But I want to make sure we're touching on the points that you want to touch. And Drew, if there's anything that you think we could talk about.
I do have another thing. I think it's good to know, it's important to know from the beginning whether they're going to be bringing dependents, because that's another level of support that they're going to need if they've got kids or a spouse. And sometimes they're admitted, and then you hear later that the spouse wants to get into a master's program or something like that. So I think there should be good communication, and because that can drastically affect their well-being here if they have their family and the family is not, like getting situated quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think international students our lives are much more intertwined with the university and with our advisor, right? We are depending on university to sponsor our visas. Our income is solely dependent on university. If we have dependents, like you mentioned, right, we are relying on university for that as well. They might also be a part of the university. So I think it's very important for faculty and staff to be aware of those things, right? And be ready to assist their students with understanding those systems and
Definitely. Another thing that I saw happen in our department was um, the international students funding was going to run out after 4 years. And that was very clear from the beginning. But after 4 years, the student wasn't finished yet. And so it was a very stressful situation because they were, going to lose their funding, and they needed something urgently. And so there was a lot of pressure to try to get them a doctoral dissertation fellowship or find funding on another project. So I think advisors can help students craft theses that can be completed within the time they have. The student might have ideas about what kind of project that they, want to do, but sometimes it's just not feasible to do any project within, 4 years. Sometimes you have to change your research design to be able to get it done.
Mhm.
So I think advisors can help backward plan that situation, because it's so uncomfortable to everybody involved when the student is doing a dream project that they
Mhm.
have spent years on, and it's just not done because maybe it's ethnographic and qualitative in nature and just takes longer than anyone thought, or maybe they had a crisis or something happened along the way. So I think backward planning to be able to get done on time is really important, more important than for the domestic students.